On Prime Crime. It's the killing that left a family and community without answers.
Are you confident that this case will be solved?
No.
But when all roads lead to one man,
our plan all along was to catch him off guard.
Did you murder someone that night, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
Jerry.
Test the DNA.
this cold case starts to heat up.
Did you ever ask the defendant directly if he committed the crime?
Yes, I did.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to Prime Crime. This is where we do a deeper dive into the most high-profile and memorable true crime cases. Our next story is about a killing that remained unsolved for almost 4 decades.
December 20th, 1979, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. A time of joy and holiday festivities was shattered by a grisly discovery outside of the popular Westdale Mall.
During this period of time, particularly in the town where this took place, they were not used to having crimes that occurred with this level of violence.
18-year-old Michelle Martinko was found dead inside of her family's Buick parked in the mall's lot.
She was found slumped over the passenger side. She had absolutely been brutalized with a sharp instrument. We're talking about multiple stabbing injuries. Now, she had over 20 stab injuries, and a lot of these were centered around her face.
Well, we got the call about 6 o'clock in the morning from my mother. She told us in words that you could almost not understand that my sister had been murdered. It was beyond awful. To imagine that my sister had been stabbed to death while Christmas shopping was just unthinkable.
Any motive at all? Can you think of any reason why anyone would want to kill her?
No, from what our understanding is a very nice young lady. It's a sad situation. We have no idea at this point.
There's actual smeared glove prints, and those were on the steering wheel, the gear shift, and also the lights. That initial crime scene showing that there was no robbery, her purse was there, was undisturbed, her packages were there, completely undisturbed, that it was just a killing.
The crime scene, though, did tell authorities something.
As the investigators made their way around the vehicle, they didn't find any blood outside of the vehicle. Whatever happened was contained within this small space. There's indications that she had injuries on her hands, her arms, defensive motion. So she had an awareness of what was happening to her at that moment in time.
So the original investigation in 1979 was a really straightforward investigation. They collected, the evidence at the crime scene and interviewed all of Michelle's friends and any logical suspects they could come up with at the time. It wasn't the Stone Ages, but they did have limited forensic technology they could work with. In the mid-'80s, it was reinvestigated by the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation. They sort of started from scratch again. But in 1985, nothing had really changed, and they came to the same conclusion, is that we don't have any one particular suspect.
Are you confident that this case will be solved?
No. No, I'm not.
The murder of Michelle Martinko remained an unsolved case for decades. No answers, no closure. But then, over 20 years later, a clue.
Back in 2006, the case was reopened by a cold case investigator. That investigator happened upon a blood sample, and he took the DNA and put it into the CODIS system, which is a national DNA data bank. Unfortunately, at that moment in time, they didn't get a hit, and it would take several more years. Finally, they were able to take this blood and turn the blood over to an individual that could do DNA phenotyping. Phenotyping gives you a physical appearance of an individual based upon their genetic mapping. They were able to come up with a new composite.
And that would ultimately bring investigator Matt Denlinger to a new technology that has since changed criminal law.
Jed match was brought to my attention by Parabon. They explained to me that it was an online open database that people had contributed their DNA samples.
We had to find some very distant relatives and then find a common ancestor with the DNA that was from the scene. From that common ancestor, look at all of the descendants.
And when we came back with an answer of a second cousin once removed was our match, to me it was a game changer.
Authorities narrowed down their suspect list to one man, and after matching his DNA from a straw he had thrown away to the blood found on Michelle Martinko's dress, law enforcement believe they finally had the killer, Jerry Lynn Burns.
After we identified Jerry as our suspect, we found an incredibly limited amount of information. In 1979, he had a couple of children. He was a traveling salesman. He had a super limited criminal history. And there was nothing about him that was screaming killer.
Now it was time to actually confront Burns and see how he would react.
We had planned this, where are we going to interview our suspect? And so we decided we were going to settle on his office. We wanted to make sure that he was away from his wife, and we were going to try to get him alone. And that's exactly what happened.
Hey, how are you today? Jerry, my name's Matt. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, I'm with the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
Oh, yeah.
This is JD.
Hi.
He's with me. Hey, can we chat with you for a second about a case we're working on?
Sure.
Do police, though, have the right man? Up next, it's all about what Burns says, or maybe doesn't say. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTube TV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTube TV today, and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTube TV. We put you in the jury box.
We're following up on an old case. I don't know if you've heard it in the news at all. It's a homicide that happened at Westdale Mall. Michelle Martinko, is that something you've ever heard of?
Yeah.
On December 19, 2018, Iowa investigator Matt Denlinger is interviewing 64-year-old Jerry Burns about the unsolved murder of Michelle Martinko, an 18-year-old young woman found stabbed to death in her family's car back in 1979.
What do you remember hearing about it?
Just it was a big deal.
A big deal. I mean, do you remember what happened?
Not exactly.
Not only is Burns surprised by Denlinger's visit, but little does he know that law enforcement have already matched his DNA taken from a discarded straw to blood found at the crime scene.
Our plan all along was to catch him off guard, not give him any forewarning that we're coming, and not give him any opportunity to think of answers to potential questions.
We had an article run in the paper the other day, and so we just got a bunch of new leads and stuff like that. People calling in, giving us tips and whatnot, and stuff like that. Well, long story short, your name came up.
Strange.
Yeah.
He had such a flat affect about him. He showed no emotion. He was trying so hard to be polite and cordial.
We had a picture made from our suspect's DNA, like those kind of things there.
That's not it, though.
Well, that's the picture we had created.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of...
Boy, it looks a lot different than I look in the mirror. But...
Something about those composite photos of the suspected killer seemingly shook Burns, as throughout the interview, he keeps on bringing them up.
Boy, that's strange, those pictures.
I know.
Do I look like that?
Well, I kind of think you do a little bit.
Those are the only pictures you had? Those three?
Yeah.
Oh.
You'd know better than we would if you looked like that in 79.
Well, I don't think I ever looked like that. I was a good-looking guy if I did.
Interestingly, though, after being presented with a search warrant,
Never seen one of these before.
Burns seems to have no problem providing his DNA to investigators.
During the interview, what came across to me as him potentially being innocent was the fact that he was so matter of fact. And the police did have a warrant to get his DNA, and he signed away and said, yeah, you can go ahead and have that. So the fact that he was relaxed, to me, was an initial indicator of the potential of him not having any part of it.
Yet it's at this point when Denlinger changes the conversation.
My typical strategy in the interview is to just let you open up, tell me some sort of story. And once I feel like you've shared about everything you're going to share with me, that's when the direct confrontation comes.
We kind of know going in that this is probably going to be a match.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why would that be?
The reality is we're not here on a whim. We're here to confirm what we already know. I already collected some DNA from you that you got rid of before. And so I'm telling you, Jerry, I already know that your DNA is going to match the DNA that we have on file.
Just one heck what I got rid of.
How would we get your DNA at the crime scene there, Jerry?
I don't know. Test it, see if it is.
No, we did.
He really didn't have an answer for any of that. He's trying to think about plausible excuses, but he knew there were none.
How would it be there, Jerry?
I don't know.
What happened that night?
Wait for the test to come back.
Jerry,
I don't think it did.
It did.
I don't think so.
Okay. Did you murder someone that night, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
Jerry.
Test the DNA.
Why did this happen, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
What happened?
We kind of assumed we'd get a steady stream of denials throughout the interview, but we really didn't. To me, it was quite suspicious. I just couldn't figure out why he wouldn't slam his hand on the desk and tell me matter-of-factly that he didn't kill her, but he never would.
Coming up, Burns admits something very curious.
What I don't believe is that you don't remember being there that night.
If I was there, I don't know. Test the DNA.
What happened?
I don't know.
You
was not there that night.
Well, we know better than that.
It's December 19th, 2018, and Iowa investigators are sitting down with Jerry Lynn Burns, the man they believe murdered 18-year-old Michelle Martinko outside of a mall in 1979. After confronting Burns with DNA evidence matching him to the crime scene, a result of a technological breakthrough using genetic genealogy, Burns claims to know nothing about the killing.
We know you were there, but the why part is what we're not positive on.
No, we better prove I was there first.
Well, I don't think that's a problem.
Investigators try to piece together why Burns, who had no connection to Martinko, would brutally stab her to death.
Is it possible that you're out at Westdale Mall and you run into some girl that you feel like talking to, or maybe you knew casually? Mm-hmm. Is it possible that you ran into her and said hi to her by the,
No.
You ever accidentally get in the wrong car out at Westdale Mall?
No.
My personal theory on what happened that night is I think Jerry was out at Westdale Mall to find someone to sexually assault. And I think he picked Michelle out at random when he spotted her walking out to her car by herself. She started to fight quite a bit. And in his panic in the situation, he killed her and left.
Burns is later arrested that day, which marked the 39-year anniversary of Michelle's death. Burns is placed in a transport cruiser. As he speaks with investigator Denlinger, listen to this odd exchange.
I think it's possible this happened. You're not remembering it. That's how I came to this conclusion. I don't know. I'm sure something like that would be. I just wonder if it'd be possible to black out. Yeah, I think it would be possible to black out. And I'm saying black out. What's that? Black out. You think you might have blacked out? No, I didn't say blackout. I said you block things out of your memories. Oh, you block things out. I gotcha.
Is it possible that he may have just blocked out what happened? And he was wondering and asking the investigator if that was a possibility. And that, to me, pointed to him already trying to create an alibi.
Or have any mental episodes in your life or anything like that where you can't remember?
I don't know. I might have can't think of the word where you hit your head. Concussion. Yeah. Probably 3 or 4 different times.
He started down a road. He's blocked out this murder because it was traumatic for him too. Maybe it was.
Jerry Burns was ultimately charged with the first-degree murder of Michelle Martinko. However, proving Burns is the killer may not be so straightforward.
The perpetrator may very well have been wearing gloves at the time, but they didn't find any latent prints, no fiber evidence, no hair evidence that could be tied back to this individual specifically. Absent an eyewitness to the event, it's very, very difficult to peg somebody down. Keep in mind, we didn't have CCTV back then. There was no cell phone tracking and that sort of thing.
When we return, Burns heads to trial, where some new admissions come to light.
Did you ever ask the defendant directly if he committed the crime?
Yes, I did. I asked him directly.
Think all court shows are the same?
We're talking about your father. Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Think again. Judge Caprio rules with common sense.
I was having contractions. I was rushing to the hospital.
Inspector Quinn, what does justice demand? Jail?
And compassion.
I'm going to take the circumstances into consideration.
The best court experience I've had.
Clearly, Judge, he's been in a court before.
Get caught in Providence.
Hi, I'm Dan Abrams. In the exploding legal and true crime genre, Law and Crime is the only network that has it all.
Good evening and welcome.
This is a complicated case.
Don't really jump to conclusions.
Welcome to Prime Crime Tonight. Another day of drama between both sides.
From multiple live trials daily to original and compelling programming, the Law and Crime Network is everywhere, and we invite you inside the jury box. This is Law and Crime.
What happened, Jerry? What's going through your mind? I don't know what's happening. You've been arrested today. Do you understand that? Yeah.
After almost 40 years, Iowa investigators believe they have finally caught the man who murdered 18-year-old Michelle Martinko outside of a mall in 1979. That man, Jerry Lynn Burns. The suspected killer was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and his trial began on February 12, 2020. The prosecution relied heavily on genetic evidence.
The suspect male DNA profile for Michelle's dress was consistent with the known DNA of the defendant,
as well as Burns' own strange comments to law enforcement.
Did you murder someone that night, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
Jerry.
Test the DNA.
Why did this happen, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
What happened?
The defense, though, jumped on the attack.
We cannot conclude that Jerry Burns' blood is the source of the DNA on the dress or the gear shift selector.
The prosecution was confronted with the reality that they had no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon, no confession, and no clear-cut motive. Yet, they did have one more thing for the jury: the testimony of Michael Allison, an inmate at the same jail as Burns.
Did you ever ask the defendant directly if he committed the crime?
Yes, I did. I asked him directly. I asked him, Jerry, did you do the crime? And he said, I can't talk about this. And he told me that sometimes he called me son, and he said, son, he said, they might have me, but I don't have to bow my head to them.
Allison even recalled an eerie remark Burns made when they were playing a game.
He had told me if I keep beating him in pinochle, he was going to have to take me to the mall.
After less than 4 hours of deliberations, the jury returned a verdict that would provide an answer almost 40 years in the making.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Jerry Lynn Burns, guilty of the charge of murder in the first degree.
There was a little moment there where I felt the pressure of, everyone that had touched this case over 40 years. I knew we weren't going to get another shot at it. So to get the guilty verdict, I just took a big sigh, and I think I'd stopped breathing for a little bit, and I was just so relieved.
At Burns' sentencing, we heard from one of the last remaining members of Michelle's family.
We're thankful that she fought so hard. Michelle played a critical role in identifying her own killer. The defensive wounds on her hand show it. She fought so hard that she was able to deflect the killer's knife so that he stabbed himself, leaving the blood that caught him. In a very real way, Michelle became her own best witness. Still, Mr. Jerry Burns was clever enough to steal 39 years of freedom he didn't deserve.
But we also heard from Burns himself, who had one final message he wanted to get out there.
First of all, I'd like to say that somebody else stabbed Michelle to death in that car that night. I don't know who, I don't know why. But I would like to thank my family and friends for their support.
Burns can certainly, protest his innocence to the heavens. The problem is this, the problem is math. Jerry Burns' DNA was actually physically found there, and at the end of the day, the chances that it is him is 1 in 100 billion. And he can argue against that all he wants, but in the end, science wins.
Burns was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
This chapter is over. We know who did it, and we know a little bit of why, and that it wasn't one of her friends who hated her or had a grudge. It was some impersonal person who had their own issues and killed my sister in this absolutely horrible way. We still are left with the fact that we've lost my sister. I've lost all of those years that she didn't live, and she had such a bright future, and she was looking forward to college, and we lost all of that.
Jerry Lynn Burns. That's the name that'll go down as the man who killed an innocent young woman and remained on the loose for almost 40 years. However, with technological advances like genetic genealogy, maybe, just maybe, he'll be one of the last cold case killers ever again. That's all we have for you here on Prime Crime. Leave us your comments on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us. And until next time, be safe.